SCP-5004 MEGALOMANIA. Before we start, please subscribe, like this video and tickle the bell. You all know how the heartless algorithm works. Or do we? Maybe it could be a future SCP story? There is 10 more addenda attached to this file. Watch or listen to them in this playlist on the screen now. Addendum 5004.1 Discovery and Background. The discovery of SCP-5004-B and its application and the containment of SCP-5004-A came about as the result of an investigation by the Letterman Commission, which itself arose from an investigative thaumatological task force out of Site 87. The task force, headed by Dr. Catherine Sinclair, was assigned to study known occult texts from the early 1900s in order to assess them for information about possible anomalous entities that were not yet known. This effort was part of a greater Foundation-wide initiative to take a more proactive role in the discovery and containment of anomalous entities and artifacts. The report, penned by Dr. Sinclair, entitled An Investigative Study into Cosmological Entities with Potential to Affect the American Federal Government, identified 13 such entities and artifacts. Of those, several could not be accounted for and 3 had been destroyed entirely. The only entity that could be identified and determined to still be active was the entity called Old Gorman, at the time discreetly inhabiting the western steps of the United States Capitol building under the cover of a sort of dimensionally shifted cocoon. Excerpt from An Investigative Study into Cosmological Entities with Potential to Affect the American Federal Government. In the second volume of a series of journals penned by United States Supreme Court Justice Charles Evans Hughes in 1916, the justice describes a meeting he had with fellow sorcerer Ames Hammond, a minor financial consultant from New York and fellow member of the Metaphysical Club. Note: a community of influential wizards, sorcerers, occultists, and thaumatologists in the late 1800s. Met monthly in Cambridge, Massachusetts. In the meeting, which took place in late 1915, the two men discussed shifting political climates and a desire to see the United States stay out of the war in Europe. Hammond, whose business investments strongly favored the continued existence of the current Austro-Hungarian state, advised that Hughes should accept the Republican nomination, should it fall to him, and that the presidency could be won using sorcery and thaumatological influences. Hughes seems to have already been considering accepting the nomination even before this meeting, and the two of them met shortly afterwards with fellow Supreme Court Justice and Metaphysical Club member Oliver Wendell Holmes. Jr. Holmes suggested the summoning of a spiritual familiar to enhance Hughes' perceived charisma, but Hammond was insistent that more dramatic action needed to be taken. Hughes writes that he and Holmes consulted numerous books of the arcane and occult before finally deciding on a devil from the 11th plane of blasphemy, Infernal Rituals and Incantations, Volume 12, Section 27, to interfere with President Wilson's re-election campaign. The remainder of the journals detail the steps taken by Hughes, Holmes, and Hammond to prepare for the summoning ceremony, which took place at the beginning of summer in 1916. In Hughes' account, the incantation took place at Holmes' estate in Washington, D.C. in the 4th volume of the journals. Hughes lists the components for the summoning as follows: 3 pieces of cloven hoof, ash from a burned text of incantations, 1 full onion, diced, the eyes of 6 frogs, a lost lamb's heart, quartered, tears of a maiden, 7 teeth, 6 pieces of silver, 6 pieces of gold, a precious gem. Note: Hughes notes that this was a ruby of some value taken from a bank, but does not elaborate on which bank. Shortly after summoning the entity, Hughes described it in his journal as such: the beast was like a man, though grotesque in shape and stature. He was no taller than the height of a man's knee, and its face, behind its monstrous filthy beard, bore an expression of great displeasure. It had skin of mottled gray and red, and its dull red eyes sat too deeply into its skull. It emerged from within a cloud of sulfur and smoke on a small, squealing steed, swore loudly and became violent to myself and my compatriots, who were forced to beat it into a corner with brooms. Once the brooming had subsided, it introduced itself as Gorman. Perhaps it sensed the disappointment in my eyes at its diminutive size, as it attempted to prove its otherworldly power by producing a terrible stink, one like sunburnt feces and bile, from out of its mouth. Myself and Oliver commenced to brooming again until it stopped. Hughes quickly realized his error. The entity was barely able to stand upright for more than a few moments, and did not have the strength yet to carry out any sort of violence against the president or his campaign. Frustrated, Hughes claims to have locked Gorman in a wooden box and kept it near his person at all times, where the devil would shout obscenities and propel small, stinking flames at the justice. Old Gorman disappears from Hughes' personal texts until after the election, when he lost handily to the incumbent Wilson. In a quick note left at the end of one journal, he writes, "Fell creature was not worth the effort. He insults me even now, and his words are filthy. He spends all hours of the day talking about latrines and their contents, and he frequently pulls at the hairs on my legs to spite me. I will have the last laugh, however. He is no use to me now, but I have paid the ritual price on his servitude for 100 years. I will bury his essence beneath the steps of the Capitol building, and he will be forced to hear every footfall over that busy thoroughfare every day for a century. Who now cackles in delight? Monstrous imp. Of course, it is me. Let this beast forever rue the day it met Charles Evans Hughes, master of magic and conjurer of spirits." In the wake of Dr. Sinclair's report, Foundation GOI specialist Dr. Justine Everwood reached out to speak to the current membership of the Metaphysical Club. Notably, the group's numbers had dwindled significantly since the beginning of the 20th century, and only 3 were able to be reached during the investigation. These included United States Supreme Court Chief Justice John Roberts, Associate Justice Stephen Breyer, and Associate Justice and Grand Arcanist Ruth Bader Ginsburg. The group allowed Dr. Everwood to keep an audio recorder on her during their meeting, though the voices of the justices were altered by seemingly anomalous means. Everwood, so you're aware of the creature beneath the stairs at the Capitol? Roberts. Old Gorman. Yes, unfortunately. A profoundly unpleasant creature. A sort of ancient trickster demon. This club has in many ways only persisted as long as it has in order to serve as a response to Gorman whenever he awakens from his terrible slumber. Everwood, what do you mean by saying that's the only reason your group has persisted? Breyer, it's been a tumultuous century for our order. Things started off strong, but then there were some assassinations in the 40s, followed by the wizard battles of the 60s and 70s. That's when we decided that we should stop putting powerful wizards on the highest court in the country. Roberts. Through some clever manipulation and some modest additional assassinations, we've reduced our numbers to just us 3, and only then because... Ginsburg. Silence. Pauses. Silence. Jonathan. Roberts. That's not my name, and you know that. Ginsburg. I said silence. What they are not telling you is that only 3 remain because they have not yet figured out how to kill me. I, the most powerful and terrible wizard who ever walked upon the face of this earth. Everwood. Interesting. Tell me more. Breyer. She's being dramatic. We haven't been trying to kill her. We've been trying to convince her to please stop casting horrible magic out in public. Ginsburg. Your demands are like a cage on my prodigious gifts. I cannot be bound by mortal desires. I must fly free, like a majestic condor or similarly winged beast. Roberts. We're of the same mind as you. Dr. Everwood. It does none of us any favors if this idea that magic is real gets out to the public. We're trying to maintain the status quo here, and that is far from beneficial. Justice Ginsburg has other. Ginsburg. I am a goddamn albatross. Jonathan, I cannot be fettered to your mindless inclinations. Roberts. She has other ideas about how our talents should be utilized. Briar. As John was saying, the only reason there are 3 of us now is that neither John or myself possess the arcane acumen required to deal with Gorman when he emerges on the foretold day. Only Ruth can handle that, and even then only maybe Everwood. Why maybe? Ginsburg. Because Charles Hughes was a fool. He thought he was punishing old Gorman by burying his essence under the steps of the Capitol. But he didn't do nearly enough of the required reading. Old Gorman is a demon, not a devil. He didn't even take the time to ask. If he had, Gorman would have been obligated to tell him that he was only passing through the 11th plane of blasphemy, not living there. Everwood. What does the difference matter? Ginsburg. Think for a moment. Ludicrous child. Gorman is a demon, and demons feed on chaos and disorder. Where, pray tell, do you think there exists more chaos and disorder in the whole wide world than the United States Capitol building? Silence. Everwood. Point made. Ginsburg. Quite. And all the while Gorman has been stewing down there, growing big and strong and increasingly annoying. I have spoken to him in his dreams on several occasions. Yes, he has a foul mouth and is very perturbed to have been given the runaround by Charles Hughes all those years ago. Make no mistake, white coat, Gorman is coming, and on that day he will rise up from beneath the earth in such great and terrible fury this country, nay, the world itself will never be the same again. But, in that dark hour, who will rise to oppose him but me, the Grand Arcanist of Brooklyn, the Witch of Washington, the Arch-Arcanist of Jurisprudence? Everwood. I see. Then we shouldn't consider this a problem. Roberts. No, it very much is a problem. Ruth's solution to the Gorman problem is a public display of power and thunder. That only might be enough to rebuke the demon. I know it might be difficult to tell, but she's getting up there in years and Gorman has only become more dangerous in time. She's liable to break a hip. Everwood. How dangerous are we talking? Roberts. I don't really know how else to say this. Gorman consumes chaos, spite, resentment, hostility. That's all here. This is not a great place to live in, but for something like Gorman, it might as well be a goddamn all-you-can-suckle tea buffet. Once he's done cooking, when he hatches after 100 years have passed, he's liable to drag all of DC into the sea. You can't see him now. We can only barely perceive him through the wards that Hughes put on him back in 1916. But he's gotten enormous. Briar. I hope you all can formulate a plan. Against an archdemon like old Gorman, we're really no match. Ginsburg. And if you can't figure it out, you'll have no choice but to unleash me, a being of terror and awe. The world will kneel before the might and magic of their sorcery queen. Ginsburg laughs. Sparks erupt from her fingertips. Everwood. Duly noted. There is 10 more addenda attached to this file. Watch or listen to them in this playlist on the screen now. Thanks for watching. Please like, share and comment. Subscribe and click the bell icon.